Good afternoon and welcome to a special Oak Harbor City Council workshop. Today is July 24th. It is 5 p.m. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I know that we have at least one council member that has notified us that he will not be here, and it's Councilor Olmberg. So I think what I'll do is we'll go around the table and then we'll excuse Mr. Olmberg. Mayor Pro Tem.
We need to excuse Councilman Wassinger. She's at that USA softball championship game in Oklahoma with her daughters.
Wow.
Yeah, big deal.
Pretty exciting stuff.
It is. U10, absolute blast. Yep.
So we'll have two council members to excuse here in just a moment. I'll start off. I'm Mayor Bob Severance and Mr. Larson.
Bill Larson, City Council.
Jim Wiesner, City Council.
Joel Servadius, City Council.
Blaine O'More, Oak Harbor City Administrator.
Nikki Esparza, City Attorney. Tara Heisen, City Council.
And Beth Munns, Mayor Pro Tem.
So I would entertain then a motion, I guess. I think we should excuse Councilor Rick Olmberg and Councilor Erica Wassinger. Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. I make a motion to excuse from this evening's proceedings council members Wassinger and Omberg.
Second.
Okay, got a motion and a second to excuse council members Olmberg and Wassinger. A motion by Councilor Larson, second by Mayor Pro Tem Munns. Seeing no questions or input, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. So we have a long meeting scheduled, but I would like to start off our meeting with a special presentation. It's my understanding, and I can tell you, I'm preparing a packet for my annual State of the City address that I give to various clubs and Chamber of Commerce, and I can tell you that I'm always amazed at the number of volunteers we have in the various, whether it be the senior center for our commissions and so forth. We have a number of people that volunteer, and that's what makes Oak Harbor special. I can't tell you how special that is, and I want to thank all those who volunteer, believe me, from our city standpoint. I have a special appreciation this afternoon for one of our younger people in our community who has been involved with the swimming pool, the John Vandersite Memorial Pool. And as you well know, around this table, that was a process that I think that North Whidbey Park and Recreation Board needs to be commended time and time again for getting that back together and getting the pool opened. If you haven't been in there, it's beautiful. It looks more updated. It looks fresher, and it just I know they're doing a better job with the equipment that they have. But believe me, that all got put together with a lot of volunteer work. I know that. I know some of those people, and I know especially some of those people that are whether they're on that park board or commissioned in that sense to do that. There are just a lot of people that go in there and have spent a lot of time getting that ready. And this afternoon, I'd like to give a special certificate of appreciation to Shane Levi Hoffmeyer for extra special efforts leading towards the reopening of the John Vandersite Memorial Oak Harbor Swimming Pool. A special thank you for the many hours of your valuable time. It's my understanding that young Mr. Hoffmeyer spent over several hundred hours. So, Shane, thank you very much. Okay, so we'll get on with our action items. We have a consent agenda tonight, and if you would like to grab the agenda, there should be extra copies here available. We are going to remove item number 5B. We had a correction that we need to make there, so at this time, items are considered to be routine, items number A through E, and they'll be approved as presented unless somebody would like to pull one of those off to discuss? If not, the consent agenda will be approved as presented. And we have some other action items, and there will be an opportunity to speak. We do have a sign-in sheet. Doesn't mean you have to sign on that sheet. You should be given an opportunity. And if so, please state your name clearly into the microphone and limit your comments to 3 minutes to ensure all citizens have sufficient time to speak. So we're going to move on to item number,
Mayor,
yes,
can we go back to item B
okay.
that we pulled off for
Okay.
procedural reasons?
Oh.
Just, you want me to go ahead and?
Yeah, oh, okay, sure.
I'll explain that one before you go on to the other action items. Procedural wise, there just was a error in the agenda packet and the wrong, for item B, the sale of the vessel, the wrong resolution was put on there, so I think we pulled it off, and so I'm looking for a motion to go ahead and approve the resolution 19.24, a resolution authorizing the sale of one vessel for non-payment of mooring charges, and that would be the resolution that presented, which you have in the packet there.
Okay, should have been on the table. That's the new resolution that's been corrected.
So it's the corrected version as presented.
Okay. We would entertain a motion to approve resolution 19-24 or questions. Mayor Pro Tem.
No, I'll make the motion unless there's questions. I
Okay.
move we approve resolution 19-24. Second.
Okay, motion and second to approve resolution 1924 as presented here now on the table. Motion by Mayor Pro Tem, second by Councilor Heisen. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. So we will move on to action item A. Ordinance number 1881 authorized the creation of a committed cash account titled Sleeper Road / Parks Use Only. And we have our finance department. Good. Patricia,
So, as per requested by council, when we received the proceeds from the Sleeper Road sale, we've set up an account that will become official if you approve this. Account number 001111013, titled Sleeper Road / Park Use Only. That account is ensuring that the funds will not be spent without council approval, but if once council approves it, only for park activities, park land or park repairs or improvements. And we came to the amount. There's an attachment in your packet that shows how we came to the amount that we reserved. And it is not completely available yet.
Down to 160.
Yeah, so the actual sale amount was $648,599.15 off the closing statements. That's what the check was for. We took out $7,800 for the appraisal fee. We took out $516.29 for the signs and the labor of $93.92 to put the signs in, the for sale signs, which equaled $8,401.21 in related expenditures. So the amount that's being reserved is $640,188.94. I'll take any questions.
Any questions about that? Recommended action is to approve the amount of $641.88. Councilor Servades.
For the sake of brevity, I move to approve the creation of the committed cash account as listed in the recommended action in our packet.
Second.
Okay, motion and second to approve the as presented in the packet. Motion by Councilor Servades, second by Mayor Pro Tem Hans. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimous. So on our list is Oak Harbor Intermediate School Mid-Block Crossing Project Award. Thank you, Al. We have an updated agenda bill being passed out. We have our city engineer, Jim Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is a project that was identified in November of 2018. The original phase of this project was we had contracted with Transpo Group to provide an analysis of the location at Oak Harbor Intermediate School. This location was identified that we had a child that was struck crossing by a vehicle that was struck crossing that location. Transpo Group provided us with an analysis and several conceptual designs. The City Engineering Department went ahead and prepared the design earlier this summer, and we prepared a bid package that we solicited bids over the last week and closed on this Monday, and we received 3 bids for this project. Anaya Trucking and Excavating, LLC, bid total $37,902.08. Trinity Contractors Incorporated, $52,325. And TransBlue, LLC, in the amount of $55,217.25. We had prepared our engineer's estimate of $28,675. We reviewed the bids for completeness and responsiveness and recommend that we enter into contract with these folks. And per our packet, recommend a motion authorizing the mayor to sign the construction contract for Oak Harbor Intermediate School Mid-Block Crossing Project with Anaya Trucking and Excavating in the amount of $37,902.08, and authorize myself to execute change orders up to $5,000 in total and add 10 additional contract days if necessary. So I will stand for questions.
So, yes, I should be asking.
And we have extra copies of the agenda bill as well.
Nobody rushing for voting there, back to city council. Any questions about this? Yes, Councilor Trevino.
It looks like it's all on us, but did we approach the district? Would they be interested in any of this?
That's a really good question.
We haven't reached out to them for this. No.
No, neither chief.
I assume we could start the contract and reach out and see if they'd like to participate in some form, but at this point in time, we have a very limited window to try to get it completed before school starts in September, so.
No, it's fair. I don't think it would change my mind. I was just hoping I know it's something they've wanted as well, so.
I'd be happy to ask them to participate. Yes, Councilor Leeson.
Yeah, I would, thank you, Mayor, I would strongly suggest we ask, because the answer is always going to be no if you don't ask the question, so. On the engineering side, looks like we're basically creating just a standard crosswalk access mid-sidewalk and a standard crosswalk. Are there anything special going in provision-wise other than just a?
Yeah, so instead of just a crosswalk across the street, it's gonna have the bump outs, gonna narrow the street width to 22 feet during the actual crossing. So it'll be a protected landing for the pedestrians to step out. Then there will be the flashing reflective, or the rapid flashing beacons. And so they'll approach it, they'll push the button, and the strobes will go off that the pedestrian is in the crosswalk to alert the traffic that someone is using that crosswalk. It's a timed situation, so they're not always flashing. It's not a school zone crossing, it's a protected crosswalk flashing device. Additionally, there'll be some stormwater improvements in there because we've got to catch the stormwater to divert it around the bump outs. So that's what the plan entails.
Well, I can see where that makes sense. I could travel that street regularly and see that the issue would be as people are parking along the north side of Southwest 6 there, somebody stepping out from behind a vehicle would be absolutely a huge fear. So, all right, thank you.
I was going to say, I I really wouldn't want it to be a surprise that when teachers or staff show up in someone's building and they have no clue what's going on. That's not being a good neighbor. I mean, we really need to be sure they know as much as possible.
Right, and notifications will go out prior to construction, so.
As much as possible, you know, not the day before the construction starts.
Right.
The next day, just
No.
give them a little lead time if we can. I know we're on a crunch, but that's just being a good neighbor, that something's happening in your neighborhood and like, you know, if you want to participate or know how it works or see the design, we'll be happy to show you. Thank you. That's all
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question, looking at the engineer's estimate and what the bids came in, and moving forward as we try to plan on what these projects cost or are going to cost, there's a pretty significant difference. It's almost a third over what the engineer's estimate was and the lowest bidder, and then the other two are significantly higher than that. Is there something that we missed in the engineer's estimate, or is there something that we have in the lessons learned moving forward where these are more reasonably close to one another coming in?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when you have a small project like this, it's really tough to estimate because the larger the project, the more volume of quantity you have, the better the price break you're going to get. And so in this particular one, two numbers jump out. Was we had actually estimated, I believe, $185 a yard for asphalt, or a ton for asphalt, and it came in at $330. It's a very small amount of asphalt. Contractor came in at a higher number than we thought. And normally we would, if we were doing a street improvement, we would estimate somewhere in the neighborhood of $110 to $125 a ton. So we even bumped that up to $185. And if you look at the concrete sidewalk, typically flat work is done $35, $40, $45 a square yard, and the bid came in at $195 a square yard. So those two right there is what jumped the price on us. Everything else is pretty much in line with where we're at, so.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now going forward, I get talking about my other projects, because these are numbers that we have on our most current bid, and these other projects are going to be similar in nature, we've revised those estimates to reflect the costs that we're actually receiving, so.
Great, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Councilor Heisler.
Thank you, Mayor. Just as a point of clarification, the amount that we are being asked to approve today is the 37 and change, and it's noted that the mayor, where is it?
It should be on the second page.
Right, had already expended or authorized an amount of $11,900 for the preparation of the report. So is is that included in the 37, or is that in addition to the 11?
The original 11,000 was already approved and paid for. The one thing that's left out here is the fact that the city will buy the signs, the reflective flashing signs, and that's another $10,000. So the cost of the project,
Yeah,
we're
no,
going
that's on
to
there.
buy the signs and install them ourselves at a cost of $10,000. That's outside of the contract scope of work. So,
Okay, perfect.
so the total cost will be $47,000.
Okay, that was the impression I got. I want to make sure that that was accurate. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Mayor Payton.
If there are not any other questions, I'll make the motion. I move that the mayor sign the construction contract for Oak Harbor Intermediate and Block Crossing Project with NI Trucking and Excavating LLC in the amount of $37,902.08, and authorize city engineer to execute the change orders up to $5,000 in total and 10 contract days in total.
Second.
Okay, motion and second, they pretty much read like the recommended action. Motion by Mayor Pro Tem, second by Councilor Servades. Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we are now moving to item number C. Action item number C. And we have Development Services Director Steve Powers has joined us. And item number C is Resolution 1916, ballot proposition, sales and use tax to fund specified transportation improvements. Public hearing continued from July 9th, 2019, City Council meeting. Mr. Powers.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I'm pinch hitting for Dennis this evening because somebody let him go on vacation. not sure who that was. So, as you noted, this was at the July 9th meeting. Council had a number of comments and questions about the language of the ballot proposition itself, as well as a few other discussion items. And staff took that direction and worked on revising the resolution through work between Development Services and the legal department. We learned that there are some fairly stringent regulations that apply to the title of ballot propositions. I think the city attorney's office has communicated with you separately on that. And so the revised resolution before you this evening is what's able to be accomplished within the confines of the law. And I believe that's it in terms of a Development Services perspective. If you have questions about the title, I would refer those to Nikki.
Okay, sure. See if anybody in the public, yes, Mr. President.
Good afternoon, Mayor Severns, members of the City Council. My name is Hal Hovey. I'm a resident of Oak Harbor. I would like to see the City Council approve this resolution and get this on the ballot as soon as possible. The reason I say that is, I know there was a big conversation at the last meeting about the timing and how the timing may not allow enough education, and that maybe there are better elections to have this ballot on the this measure on the ballot. In the wise words of Councilman Wiesner, the answer will always be no if you don't ask the question. I think he said that about 10 minutes ago. I think if you put this off a year, you're facing the timing of a presidential election year. As we all know, all the major elections for the last 10 or more years have all been throw the bums out type of elections, and elections that get lots of turnout, from the little bit of research I've been able to do, tend to not pass ballot measures that result in tax increases. So it may not be best to wait a year to put it on the ballot. So again, I just would encourage you to get it on the ballot as soon as possible. If it doesn't pass this year, then you still got another chance. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. So now, let's bring it back here. City Council. Yes, Whenever.
We've kicked the can down the road a lot, but I worry, I don't want to go and fail. I think sometimes that does more damage, and we've got 2 months barely to do the education. Do we know if the school district, with knowing that they're going to build another school, will have a special election that we could split the cost with them and not have to wait a whole year if we don't do it now? Does anybody have any inkling, possibly? I'm just looking at other, you gave us a date of other things.
I believe that they won't have any until 2022.
Oh, okay, no, that's too far.
But I think in part answer your question, Mr. Oborn did hand out other dates next year
Yeah,
that would
but-
be
But they're
available.
more expensive and we would be eating
Yeah, I
the
think-
whole cost. I mean, it's not free, and it's not free to even put it on with this election. It's just because there's other things on a ballot, you can split it.
For discussion, I would probably narrow it to whether you want to run it in November or postpone it. And then after November, we'll still have some time, and you can look at what elections you want in the future and look at the options. I gave you the other three options. I gave you, but I recommend you just to narrow your focus down to today, just postponing or proceeding.
I think the explanation is better on this, but does staff have any other ideas other than us to get educated and try to make as many groups? I mean, as far as getting the word out. I mean, it's one thing to have it here, but you've got the write-up in the pamphlet. I mean, it isn't just putting it out and talking about, I mean, you've got to have a full campaign. I've done one for a school maintenance levy. I've done one for the pool in the past. So you've got to be organized, and usually you have, usually working with 9 or a good 6 months, not 2, to get the word out. And vacations are coming up. I mean, we still have vacations in August, and hopefully not the 20th.
So
But I mean,
staff,
I'm just really,
staff's not able to organize
Okay.
a promotion campaign,
Okay.
and because we're prohibited from, by law from doing that.
Okay.
Our only role can be to provide neutral, factual information, which I
Right.
think we had that sample facts sheet that had been put together. I think, and Nikki can speak to the requirement to find people to write the pro and con statement in the voter pamphlet itself. We have, of course, been talking about this via our broadcasts
Right.
For quite some time, and so it's not as if this is the first time that the public should hopefully be hearing about this if the council takes action this evening on it. But again, as we've said before, we're not able to lead the charge in a public education promotional campaign.
can I just take a little poll? How many of you know that we're thinking about this if you're not staff? 1, 2. It's just the staff.
They're the only two.
Okay, from the staff,
That's 100%.
out of 2 people. But I mean, I'm just, okay, if we're prohibited from running a campaign, as long as you talk only the facts, you still have to have that organized. You mean we just sit back and we do, I'm sorry. There's got to be something we can organize to do to lay out a plan, to be sure we hit the papers here, we hit this here. It's still an organized plan. It is a campaign in a sense because you're getting out factual information, whatever you call a campaign or whatever. But if you're not organized and you don't decide, okay, this week we're doing this month we're doing this or whatever, we have 2 months to get the word. I'm just, generally, even on voting day, you're gonna have, it seems like 75%, well, hell, I haven't heard about this at all, which usually happens. And I wanna win, and this is so important, and we've put it off forever and ever and ever and kicked the can down the road. So I want this, but I'm not sure I'm ready to put it on the ballot because it has to be, you have to have the initiative and everybody has to jump on board.
So
But
clearly,
that-
it's the council's choice.
Yes.
That would be my first comment. My second comment would be that this is a multi-departmental effort. And so there is no one department that's quote-unquote responsible for leading that charge. I guess my third comment is that we've been proceeding at the pace at which we perceive the council has been willing to take up this topic. If that's not the right pace for you on this topic at this time, then again, it's purely the council's choice as to how you handle it today.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, wait a minute, did you have a comment,
Well,
Nikki?
I was just going to point out that as we shared in our memo, we do have plans to provide information in the way that we normally disseminate information. That's what we have to be sure that we're careful about is disseminating information in the same way that we disseminate other types of information. And so we sent you a sample of the fact sheet, which is not finalized because we're not going to finalize until we know the direction that council wants to go. And of course, that would be shared the same way we share other information on our websites, on our Facebook pages, on Channel 10, the same way that we normally disseminate information, because we can't campaign for this because that would be a violation of state law. But we can share information, and we have a plan to share information if that's the direction the council wants to go.
Councilor Larson?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with a number of things that Mayor Pro Tem had said. First of all, this is important. And second of all, we have put it off for far too long. We have, to beat that cliche like a dead horse, kicked this can down proverbial road for far too long. This need is now. This need has been for a long time. I believe it would be a failure of this council if we choose not to act for fear of failure. I think we need to step up, do what's right, be it popular or not, because it's necessary, it is important, it has been put off, and we have 2 months. Our electorate is going to be informed of the things they want to be informed of, whether we have 2 months or 9 months. It would be sheer overkill to expect a campaign of information for a ballot measure to last 6 to 9 months. I think we can do the job in 2. And people are going to have a choice between a yes or a no box, and then we're going to have to decide how to proceed based on what our electorate decides in November. So I think absolutely we need to move forward. We have taken our time, and it has been a long time coming. Thank you.
Councilor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree wholeheartedly with Councilmember Larson. I think that, this isn't a new topic. Staff has already drafted the memo. They've already drafted a fact sheet. They put a lot of work into condensing the list of specific projects. So I have the utmost confidence in our ability to provide information and accurate information. One question I have, it was in the last packet, it's not in this one, in addition to the revised language, but I'm assuming that the project list would be in the voter's handbook or, okay.
I added it to our issue statement that was attached to the memo. There's the website
Perfect.
Listed, and that's where the projects will be embedded.
It was really nicely condensed in the last packet, so just to make sure that was still part of the package. We know the facts, all we can do is what we can do, and I think we should do it.
Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. I've been putting a lot of thought to this because generally, overall speaking, I'm more for trying to keep costs down. And the reality is this is a cost, however, that is not within our control. This is a cost of inflation that has caught up with us over the last several years due to the regulations and constraints put on us down in Olympia. And the reality is this is something that just needs to go before the people. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They need to have a voice in whether or not they're willing to contribute some additional funds to go to a very specific thing, which is the maintenance of our streets, which is an important part of the infrastructure that the city supplies to its citizens. And so the question obviously isn't whether or not this ballot needs to go before the folks. We've showed a need for the additional funding in order to maintain our streets at a reasonable level, and we've shown that at the current course our streets would degrade to a point where we're not going to be able to maintain them any longer, and we would find ourselves rebuilding them, which is an extensive cost. So all that has been vetted out over the last several months. So now it's a question of, whether it goes before them now or later. Obviously, the reason now is so appealing is it's the least expensive election obviously we can run, right? We have a zero chance of the folks approving this if we don't run it, and we have a 50-50 or whatever wager you want to make on the chance they approve it. It's really going to be their choice. I think what we're all concerned about is that when the people speak, is that we're doing a good job of providing the information and the tools to them that they need in order to make a proper decision. I think that's what we're all talking about here. Whether or not us as community leaders feel secure in our ability to get the message out, to provide that proper tool to the people to make that informed decision. What if we wait? Well, if we wait, we basically have the same challenge ahead of us, right? We just have a little more time to do it in. We do have a fiduciary consideration there in the fact that a special election is going to cost the city more money. But at the same time, obviously, if we spend money frivolously on an election where we're not prepared, we're also not keeping up our fiduciary. So I just want the people to understand. I mean, that's the challenge with us. It's not a challenge amongst us as to whether or not this item should be on the ballot and should be put before the people so that they have a say in how much additional money they want to contribute to help us maintain the streets in their community. That's not the question at all. I mean, we're all for this ballot and we're all for the people having a say. It's just a matter of this dilemma of whether or not we feel as though we can fill that information void that we have an obligation to fill, to make sure that we're getting it out to the people. So I guess the swaying factor for me in going onto this ballot is that we've got the citizens, we've got several city elections that are taking place. The people that are concerned about how the city's ran and want to have a voice in the city are going to probably show up for this election more likely than they would show up for a special election. I agree with Mr. Hovey in the fact that typically presidential elections bring out a whole different kind of group of electorate, but here we do have a ballot that's going to have what we would hope to be a reasonable turnout by our constituents, placing a voice upon the items that are already on it. So because of that, I think we have a challenge ahead of us to get the word out, but I would be for getting this on this next ballot. I think the longer we wait, we do water this down a little bit. We realize it's going to take some time to build the money in this fund, to be able to actually make it operate, to be able to get it out there working on the streets before they degrade any more than they are. So, for every month that we wait, that's a month of that time is extending, that we get that funds built up and are able to actually put the taxpayers' money to use. So for that reason, I would certainly lean towards taking on the challenge and taking the role as community leaders to try and do as much as we can to get as much word out as we can and the facts about the information to our constituents so they can make an informed decision on the next ballot. Thank you.
Councilor Sarvady.
Thank you, Mayor. I pretty much agree with most of what all of my peers have said. I would just sum it up. I wish we had a tremendous boom in commercial development, residential development that would solve all these problems. But let's not kid ourselves. I don't see that happening in the next immediate future where we need to tear up streets and repair infrastructure. One of the ways I've looked at this rather than a cost is just an investment in infrastructure. And so in that flyer, I was just double checking my math, but the informational piece that was prepared, a $500 taxable sale, call it a washer, a dryer, would equate to an additional $1 in sales tax if this passes. And so to me, that's asking the people and getting the word out. Are you willing to make that investment in the city's infrastructure, in your infrastructure? It's not ours, and we don't own it. We're just here to provide the services. I think most folks, if we had the chance to sit down with them and they look at the car tab option versus the sales tax option, they would probably come to the conclusion that sales tax obviously is more equitable. We watch people all day long come into town that don't live in town to shop at Home Depot, shop at Walmart, and those are two of the biggest probably generators of sales tax. So it spreads that out across everyone that's using our streets in a way that if we just go with the car tab option, it clearly puts that burden on the folks that live in the city limits or that register their cars here. I think everyone in every meeting has said they totally support this, and I support it. A no vote right now to me is more of it's almost a vote of no confidence in not necessarily the staff, but in our ability as a city to get the word out, which I don't think is realistic. I think we can. Or it's a vote of no confidence in the public's ability to want to be involved and learn about what's going on. And there will be people that just vote no. They don't want any tax increase, and I get that. But I think to I hate to use the word, but to kick the can down the road is a vote of no confidence in a lot of different entities and people. There will be people that just, for whatever reason, won't support a tax increase, and that's fine. But in this case, I think this is an excellent opportunity to rebuild trust. If we can show, and I'm glad Jesse's sitting back there, if we can show the public, hey, these are dedicated funds, they're not going to get moved into the general fund, they're not going to get allocated anywhere else, but this is a very dedicated program, and here's when it's coming to your street. In 2021, or whatever the year is, this is when your street's going to be redone. I think it's an excellent opportunity to rebuild that public trust in local government. That, hey, they're doing a good job with the resources we give them. So, for that reason and just the fact that it needs done, I will support it right now.
Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick follow-up for the people listening. I want to point out that the car tab tax option that Councilor Servadius talked about would not have required a vote of the citizens and would have been solely upon the backs of the citizens within the Oak Harbor city limits. Anybody registering a vehicle within the Oak Harbor city limits. We all elected that was not the best route to go. It did not give the people a voice in how they wanted this handled. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem.
Is there any other discussion? Nope. I move to adopt Resolution 1916, providing a ballot proposition to be submitted to qualified electors of the City of Oak Harbor to authorize a 0.2% sale and use the tax for the purpose of financing city streets improvement projects.
Second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. As the recommended motion reads in your packet, motion made by Mayor Pro Tem, second by Councilor Larson. Seeing no other input or questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously.
So, Mrs. Sparson, I can't put a sign up in my front yard that says, vote yes for this? Or
You
read
can.
carefully?
You can, but the city can't.
You can.
I can, okay.
Personally.
You, as Ms. Munns, the individual.
Okay,
can
all
personally
right.
support whatever you'd like.
It's gonna go up. Thank you.
Okay, so we will move on to action item D. Looks like our last action item for this evening, and that is Resolution 19-27, authorizing funds to complete the Autumn Winds sculpture site improvements. Looks like we have our Parks Director Hank Needham here.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and lead the presentation, but Hank has a lot of history on this, so if you start going into history, I'm gonna look over here to my left and help me ask him for his help with
Welcome,
this
Hank.
presentation. So, just for a little reiteration, sometimes we were calling this wrong. So I think when we went back and looked at the history here of this project, the correct name when it came out was the Autumn Winds. I think sometimes we called it the Autumn Leaves, and then people call a lot of other things. So, yeah, just a little history. This kind of project started in 2015. The Autumn Wind sculpture was commissioned. Of course, it's on the corner of SR 20 and Northeast Avenue. It was constructed in 2017. And landscaping is what we're talking about, and lighting. And this was in the original concept, but it really wasn't included in the proposal. The proposal just focused on the sculpture itself. It didn't really focus on the landscaping and the lighting that needs to go along with this. So in the budget process, $15,000 was put in there. Public Works has already started the initial landscaping for this project. Doing some work around it. I know we've got some encouragement from the school, because a lot of times people think it's the school's project and it's our project, and so it's reflected, and I think we owe it to them to complete this project. So some of the things we need to do is install irrigation, landscaping, water meters, so it actually has just over $3,000 system development fee, and then Hank Neidham's been right there. He's been working on some of the other issues, and so some of the numbers are a little bit updated, actually lower than what we forecasted, because he was still getting bids on it. So, and the proposed resolution is to increase the total amount from what was into the budget to 35, from the 15,000 to the 35,000. Like I mentioned, it includes the Parks Department labor, permit fee, irrigation expenses, lighting and contingencies in there too. And in your packet, there's a itemization of all the house in there. And just for clarification, you've asked in the past what the financial impact will be. Counting the other proposed projects that are in the work that come to the council and counting this project, it'll be the fund balance for the Creative Arts Fund to $58,011. I guess I'll take any questions and then also recommend that you approve the resolution 1927, authorizing funds to complete the Autumn Sculpture improvement process so we can finish the landscaping for that project.
Steve, first I'll ask the public. Anybody here? Okay, seeing none. Council, question, input? Councilor Sebadios.
Thank you. I love art. I think this is very cool. It's a big piece. I love it. But I'm really struggling with the price. Irrigation. I mean, I'm just looking at, I understand labor, landscaping. How much irrigation do we need? Could we not put those green bags around the trees and get them established? I know there's some topsoil that was dropped in for flowers or something probably in front of it. My initial thought when I heard some of these numbers coming up, and now that I see them, is the district is very much pushing their, we're one of 14 green schools in the nation. They used to have an outdoor part or classroom at North Whitby. Could we not encourage some kind of co-op with the school that they come over there and one of their environmental clubs waters some of that stuff and takes care of it for the 3 to 4 months out of the year when it's not raining? Just seems like a lot of money.
Well, what you see out there is just the initial phase of the landscaping. That's the larger trees in that. But the scheme of the landscaping is that we're going to have that whole area landscaped with a lot of ornamental grasses and shrubbery and that kind of thing, so that it's going to make a really big splash. Right now we are watering the trees, and our guy that goes around watering is down there watering it. And if you put the bags need to be filled with water, so you're still having to go out and physically go out and water it. But I feel that a good landscape design, good scheme there is really going to accent that art piece. And it has needed that. And the vision is that you've got the ornamental grasses that will be kind of swaying in the wind in front of the art piece. And I think that's really going to add to the effect of that. And to do that, now you've got multiple plants, and if you envision what you got at Windjammer, look at the thousands of plants we have at Windjammer in like the retention areas, all these multiple plants. So that would be hard to water with bags or anything like that. So that's why we looked at bringing in irrigation. The big part of the cost is the system development fees. And the water will be brought up from Izette Street. There's already a meter base in place there, so we're looking at running a line down the alongside of the street going to the corner. It's about a 600-foot run. And then, since we've got the trench going anyway, we would then throw a conduit in so that we can light it now, or we can light it later. At least we got the conduit in the ground. So there's potential savings there too on, do we light it up right away? But it makes sense to throw the conduit in the ground now.
Has the Arts Commission weighed in on this?
Yeah, they're very supportive of it. So, then the other thing we've already talked about is consolidation with the sculpture park across the street. So we would use the same meter, so we wouldn't have to pay a $3,000 connection fee, system development fee again. And also the electrical will be the same concept, and they would bore under it, and we would use the same point. If at some point we vacated that property, we would pull back to the point where the sculpture is, but so we would save, so there's some consolidation of the costs that are in here. So some of the points you have with the $35,000, it's not all, we can utilize some of the electrical costs and some of the system development for the water. Will minimize the cost if we want to bring water and electrical over to the sculpture park for further expansion in that area too.
That's all I have at the moment.
Counselor Wiesner?
Thank you, Mayor. I too am concerned about the price. You know, we're going to end up, looks like almost $90,000 into this sculpture. The other concern I have is the Arts Commission budget, understanding that I am absolutely not a fan of sitting on public funds. Public funds should be put to work for the public as soon as practical, knowing that we also have to be fiscally responsible and look at down times. Obviously, the Arts Fund is not the type of fund that we have to worry about keeping a significant balance in so much because of the fact that it's not funding essential items, and we wouldn't find ourselves dipping into it during lean times. But it is a fund, obviously, that has built up quite a bit of money. I think the Arts Commission has done fantastic things, and I guess, Therese, this speaks to the deal we're getting on all the sculptures that you've arranged to be transferred into town when we look at what the cost of this one sculpture is and the number of sculptures we're getting for the money. But I guess I wouldn't be fiscally responsible if I didn't point out that you know, we've gone through, if we commit to this, we'll have gone through $105,000 of the Arts Fund so far this year. It's a fund that has expected revenues of about $26,000 a year.
Double that, that's half the year.
That's half the year. So we're you know, we've gone through 2 years with the funds in 1 year. But if this does have the support of the Arts Commission, you know, I'm willing to sign off on it. You know, it's the Arts Commission who's got to be conscious, obviously, of the amount of time it's going to take to build this fund back up to be able to do any other big projects moving forward.
Yeah, I know we had to estimate on the high side, so we hope, we don't want to spend any more than we absolutely have to, so we put the 5,000 in. I didn't want to come back and say we want no money, so we did this estimate and I told Hank, let's go on the high side.
Yeah, and I did get another bid in on some electrical just today, which was substantially lower than the one I had before, so I feel comfortable that there was a savings of $5,000 to $7,000 on electrical on it, based on this new bid.
And we'd still be able to achieve the extension to the other
Yeah.
park, so we'd have that cost savings when that time came.
Yeah, the electrical come down, they've got what they call handholds, and then that would be one option, is then you come into that handhold, do a new connection in the future.
Counselor Heisen?
Just want to put it out there that I'm volunteering to come and help landscape. If we want to save on labor, just let me know. I'll help.
Mayor Broken?
Hank, so the water would be the same thing. The water that brings over will be able to connect if we need anything towards the sculpture, park on it. So in a sense, it's 2 for 1, in a sense, 2 projects for 1.
Unless there's some legality
Right,
I'm not
right.
aware of,
Okay.
since it's going to the other side of the street, that I know.
Well, I mean, I think I called you and I said, what is wrong with this sculpture? I mean, I can see the cement, more cement than I can the sculpture. And you're right, it has no pop. It looks like dull Jane for sure. And it needs that to add to it to bring it to life. So definitely, it needs that pop. It's a lot of money, but I think we'll be very, very happy when everything is established and done. I'd rather have it than dull Jane sitting there on the highway. The bigger trees have helped, but it still looks pretty, and the dirt helped to hide
Yeah, we would be bringing in more
more
dirt,
dirt and make
trying
the
to cover
sculpture.
more of
Okay.
that, and some accent boulders along with the extra additional plantings in that, so.
I mean, at a minimum, we gotta finish the landscaping. The question is whether we add the electrical, but talking to Hank, I think he thinks with the shrubbery and stuff, or the lighting, it will really go together and accent really well.
Should the conduit big enough in case we could use fiber optic out there? I mean, you know, I'm a big advocate. You dig a hole, you put everything possible so we don't have to dig again and have archaeology. So I'm serious.
2-inch conduit that's what we got a price on.
So we
is
could
2-inch
thread
conduit.
something else in there if we needed
That's
to?
pretty good sized conduit, yeah.
Okay, I'm just, we're gonna dig a hole. Let's put as much in that baby as we can
Yeah.
and make it work. Okay.
Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. So I guess I just have a question. If we're looking at other bids that are significantly, over $5,000 less than this, is there a reason we're not gonna wait until we have those lower numbers that are more in line with what we're actually gonna spend and then coming back for approval of something that is more reasonably priced?
I think we had a savings on the electrical. You're not going to see that on anything else. If we go out, a lot of the others are the system development fee. It is what it is.
So you're saying that these numbers as they stand are with the less expensive, the lower bid on the electrical?
No, what I'm saying is that the savings that I was talking about is all in the electrical portion of the project, based on a bid I got on just the electrical. The other parts of the project, which is topsoil, plantings, labor for the landscaping, irrigation, bringing the water to the corner, we'll be doing a lot of that work in-house. With the water department's going to come in and trench and that. You're not going to get a huge amount of savings. I mean, we pretty much know that we're on track with those costs. We didn't know about the electrical, if that makes sense.
And we had the original 15,000 in the budget. And the reason why we're trying to do this in one area, so we have some costs we've already known, but we're exceeding the 15,000. So I'm coming back, and rather than coming back and just doing the landscaping separate, and then coming back again to the lighting, I asked Hank to estimate it so that we can just do one swoop through. So that's why we got a combination of some actual costs. But at a minimum, I think we've already started the landscaping, and we really need to continue to finish the landscaping component on there, and there will be more than the 15,000 we originally envisioned. So that's why we kind of have this combination here, and why the timing is the way it is.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Any other comments? I'll be willing to make a motion. Move to approve Resolution 19-27, authorizing funds to complete the Autumn Wind Sculpture Site improvements.
Second.
Motion and a second, as reads in the recommended action. Motion by Mayor Pro Tem, second by Councilor Heisen. Other questions or input? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. That's our last action item. So by golly, we're on schedule, looks like. And moving to the non-action item A, under Development Services, we have our Development Services Director back, Steve Powers. Welcome. Discussion of City-County Joint Planning Area JPA expansion.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. So what I have for you this evening is hopefully a relatively succinct PowerPoint presentation to complement the agenda bill that we prepared and put into the packet. I think the council understands why we have this topic before you. It was part of the comprehensive plan docket that you approved for us earlier this year. And so I'll jump right into this presentation. As I started my comments, our 2019 comp plan docket includes a JPA item. Just as a technical point, the joint planning area isn't technically part of our comprehensive plan, but obviously it's a closely related subject, and so it's clear to us, of course, why the council was interested in that. To refresh your memory, joint planning areas are governed by the adopted countywide planning policies. That requirement to have those comes to us from state law. It's a requirement under the Growth Management Act that the cities and or the county and the cities within have this framework, how we talk to each other when we're talking about planning areas of mutual interest. Again, those policies are jointly adopted by the county and the cities within, and then the joint planning area, of course, is jointly adopted by the county and whatever city we're particularly talking about. So the countywide planning policies, as you saw from the text in your agenda bill as well as the attachment, they define what a joint planning area is. They set the policy for their designation, and they also address the question of timing. When is it the appropriate time to consider revisions to a joint planning area? Normally, it says that we do that when we're doing our major update cycles, but there's also a mechanism for us to do that off-cycle if you want to use that term. Apologize for the amount of text on the screen, but I did think it was important to put the definition in front of the council. It was also in your agenda, Bill. As the name obviously implies, it's an area where we have some joint interest with the county. It's areas immediately outside and adjacent to the municipal growth area. I'll skip through some of the middle part there, pick up that last sentence. Broadly, such areas are intended to provide an opportunity for long-term planning beyond the normal 20-year planning horizon. As you've heard us talk about a great number of times, the UGA urban growth area is the 20-year horizon. The joint planning area are those areas, the time frame outside of that. So here's a copy of the existing joint planning area. This map comes from the county comprehensive plan. Interestingly enough, in the county's comp plan, the JPA is actually one of their comprehensive plan items. Okay, so there's a little bit of a difference in how we look at that. It actually has some bearing procedurally, but I'll touch on that later on. So as you can see, let's see which one am I doing. Here we go. Okay, so the existing urban growth area boundary is like such, as we know. Land in the yellow there are the properties which are already in the city limits. The land in the pale purple are inside of the urban growth area but not yet annexed. This boundary here is the joint planning area boundary. The red color and the rust color and the blue color denote lands of long-term rural significance or lands of priority growth area. And so as you can see, and then there are some which is undesignated, and by our policies, our joint policies, we don't have to designate all land one thing or the other, at least not initially. And so within the boundaries of the existing JPA, there is some land which is identified as places where potentially we might grow when it comes time to expand our urban growth area. And there's some areas that under our adopted policies we're going to want to avoid. And usually those are those lands of long-term rural significance, because there's a reason why the county from a state GMA perspective should try to hold on to those lands and not see them characterized by urban development. So I've mentioned to policies a number of times, specifically in your countywide planning policies 3.2.1. There are some criteria that we'll want to look at as we think about what might we want to do with the joint planning area. So there should be lands adjacent to the UGA, adjacent to essential public facilities and urban services, maybe lands which facilitate connectivity between established or projected transportation corridors. I think this fourth bullet point is a big one. Lands where interjurisdictional long-term coordination would be beneficial due to sensitive nature of adjacent uses. And then also there were a number of points which I've condensed down in that last bullet point, which is you should draw logical boundary lines. Don't split parcels. Don't sort of just do wacky stuff with the lines. Try to keep them regular. Don't create holes in the JPA, that kind of thing. So we listed some things in the agenda bill that potentially the council might want to think about as factors for considering expansion, or rationale if you want to think about it in that perspective. We can look at areas that acknowledge urban services routes. For instance, our water line from Anacortes. Obviously, that's an urban service. Obviously, we have an interest in how things transpire along that corridor. We could definitely think about connectivity to transportation corridors in the form of State Route 20. What are the joint decisions that we should be making with the county, or at least just the enhanced communication that we should be having with the county in those lands along State Route 20. A concept which is a little different for us, but has common use elsewhere across the country, is the idea of a sphere of influence. Which can roughly equate to your UGA plus. I think that might be a way to think about it. Supersize UGA maybe is a phrase that you could use. An area that might make logical sense, and I think we talk about it in this fashion, logical sense where once the existing growth area is is necessary to expand, where might we want to see that expansion taking place? Typically, we think south, southwest, and west, because we think about the geographical boundaries that we have and natural topography that prohibits our expansion in some other areas. So the concept of a sphere of influence, what might that look like? Unique infrastructure needs and preservation of affordable housing. I've put up here the wagon wheel situation. I think that's a perfect example here of a situation where the city and the county were working together collaboratively to talk about how do we solve a unique infrastructure problem to help keep affordable housing occupied. Now, granted, that particular example falls inside of our existing joint planning area, but it's pretty easy to imagine that that kind of situation will come up elsewhere and not necessarily inside of the JPA. I've already mentioned the logical direction for city growth. If we think about the long-term horizon outside of that 20-year window, south, southwest, and to the west, and then just in general, the concept of joint city-county decision-making for land use and transportation purposes. So what we've done is just to create a possible map that would utilize these factors as a way to redraw those lines. I want to emphasize it's just a possibility, and it's just a stab in the dark trying to guess the things that the council might be interested in. All right, so let me walk you through this if I could, please. You, of course, are going to be familiar with our existing urban growth area boundary, the land which is already in the city limits. This sort of yellowish green color here denotes the land which is the boundary of the existing joint planning area. So let's take these sort of from north to south. We've identified both the urban services corridor, because that's where our water line runs from Anacortes, as well as the importance of SR 20. We've roughly applied a quarter-mile boundary on either side of that. And I do want to give credit to Ray Lindenberg, our associate planner, for his map work here. He took the time to make sure that the lines that we're showing you conceptually don't split parcels, take in a whole subdivision if we had a subdivision, rather than split it, leave half of it in one area and half of it in the other. And so that's why the width of this corridor varies a bit, because he was looking at those other criteria that tell us how we should draw those lines. Similarly, we've applied the same roughly quarter-mile boundary along Crescent Harbor Road and Reservation Road. Again, we have infrastructure there. It's a major transportation corridor. There's perhaps some logic to the idea that we'd want to be thinking about how are those lands adjacent to that being utilized. As we move more to the south and the southwest, this is where that concept of sphere of influence might come into be. Roughly this distance from the existing JPA to the new purple line is roughly 1.5 miles, but where it made sense to go a little bit beyond that, just for boundary reasons or topographical reasons, we've done that. But it stops at the northern boundary of the Ebey's Preserve, with one exception, and that's this area right here, because that is the Oak Harbor Airport. And there is some logic there as a transportation facility. There's been a lot of conversation in the last few years about private efforts to reestablish true air service in and out of there, whether it's charter, whether it's parcel services. And so, again, conceptually, what we've done is to drop that line down in there so that you could pick up the airport and then get right back up to the boundary with Ebey's Preserve. And so that's the basic concept that might implement those factors that I identified for you. Sort of what are the next steps on this? Well, this is where I bring the county into the conversation. I mentioned to you that in the way they view the world, the joint planning area is part of their comprehensive plan. So we have two paths available to us to talk to the county about considering changes to the JPA. One is through their comprehensive plan docket process, the other is through their work plan process. Guidance from the county staff says they would actually prefer that we make the proposal to them to talk about it as part of their comprehensive plan docket. There's a surety in that process. If the county commissioners put it on there, that means the staff will work on it next year. And that was actually their recommendation to us, and we appreciated that. In order to get that ball rolling, we need to get a letter to the county by Wednesday of next week. Not that has any great amount of detail or analysis in it just yet, but that provides to them the preferences of the council, the direction that we might be heading, some idea of what our public process is going to look like, because we know that's important to them as well. And so what we would propose to do is, after we get some thoughts from you folks this evening, send a letter to the county by next Wednesday, and then we'd start working with the Planning Commission and the Oak Harbor public to explore the opportunities and constraints, develop a recommendation. We would engage you folks as necessary, maybe come back at another workshop, depending upon how the timing works. At some point, we would ask the Planning Commission to make a recommendation to you on an actual map with an actual boundary. And then we'd look for your approval, and then we would forward that material to the county. Tentatively, I'd like for us to be able to get all of that work done by year's end. I think that would be helpful for us, just from a work perspective, and it would be helpful for the county, because if the commissioners put it on the docket, they'll be taking that action towards the tail end of the year. It should sync up very nicely as they start their work. Whoop, that's it. I guess I better stop right there. So, that's it for my presentation on this topic, and I would love to help you with your questions.
So I have a couple of questions. Is the airport currently in the EBs?
It is, which is sort of unique. You might recall that 2 years ago, when we looked at this topic, we did sort of a similar thing in that very general area there, when we were talking about a different JPA boundary map, but it is inside of the preserve.
So is that the brown, is the reserve the brown?
It is. I'm sorry, and
Okay.
I apologize, Mayor, I didn't say that. This light brown line like this
Yeah.
is the boundary of EB's, the northern boundary of EB's preserve.
Do you know what's in the area that's not included?
This is a subdivision.
Yeah,
There's a built-out subdivision in
Oh.
there. Yeah, when you look at it, has almost like an urban density sort of look in terms of the lotting pattern. It's definitely more urban than rural.
Okay, and finally, my last question is, do we notify the landowners? And do they get notified?
I believe the county would do that as part of their process. One of the things that we've engaged with the county on so far is what level of information is necessary for us to get the ball rolling with them. And there's not that level of sort of notification at this stage. This is more of a statement of intent, and then the real work would happen later on.
Yeah, Mr. Oborn.
Yeah, the UGA process is more when we look at what property owners want to come in. This is a precursor, so I shouldn't really bring it up, because really we're not discussing UGA at this time. This is just the policy decision of what areas we want to jointly plan with them. So this is kind of a vision of reaching out there and visioning this. I appreciate Steve working with me, because some of it's my perspective. I've really kind of done it before, so there's a lot of history there. But this is certainly subject to council input, planning commission input, and public input. But I mean, just to start the discussion, we kind of wanted to throw a map that kind of meets Steve went through the criteria that were talked about, and our point, I think we can justify this expansion of our JPA by using the county's definitions of justification for expanding your UGA.
One other point, if I could, that I did leave out, because we didn't put it on the legend of the map. The county divides the county into planning areas. You see that in their comprehensive plan. They have a north, central, and south planning area, and then Camino is its own planning area. And the other reason that this line makes some sense at this location, while not exact, it's roughly at the line that separates the central planning area from the north Whidbey planning area. So again, there's a little bit of logic of all the things that are sort of happening at that location.
Okay, other questions? Councilor Servatius?
Thank you. I support it. It feels a little Groundhog Day-ish. It has been 2-ish plus years since that initial map went out. It was more south-southwest. Granted, it's just joint planning. It's not a commitment. I don't picture us expanding all the way west to the water there. And I would hope that the county would not flinch when they see the size of this area and realize, or in any way impede, I guess, our long-term progress. I don't see us going all the way west there, but I do see us going south, southwest, and maybe the areas along 20 could be very critical, so I support it. Do we have, that map is not in here?
No, because we just got that map done today. The maps that I was able to put in there, frankly, were the ones I was able to do myself, which is why they're pretty basic, and I needed Ray's help to do this one.
Sure.
Yeah.
So anyway, yes, in its infancy, it's infancy, but at this stage, I support it, thank you.
Councilor Eisen.
I agree. Considering all the criteria and how many factors you had to deal with, I think that this is very logical. And I think it makes a lot of sense. And I liked Council Member Servais' emphasis on long-term planning, which is something that, I always try to have in the back of my mind is not 5 years from now, but 2050. So, good job.
Thank you. And if I may, Mayor, I think it's a great point because there actually is a difference between long-term planning and thinking about where the city may grow. While they may be hand in hand with each other, there are also other areas where it may just make sense for us to continue to be thinking together about land use and transportation, environmental issues, other kinds of things, not because it will be at some point part of Oak Harbor's urban growth area and within the city limits at some point in time, but because we truly have a joint interest in how that will work for the benefit of both the city and the county. And I think that's a really important point, and I think we will continue to make that in our information that we provide to the county.
Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'm glad you said you just put this in today because you had me second guessing myself. I was like, I don't remember seeing that. But second, I also wholeheartedly support this. This is about collaboration. We've been communicating better with the county, they with us, getting the planning commission on board early, and looking at the long-term potential and reasons to not only look at areas of possibly expansion, but also protection. And this provides for both of those, and it keeps the door open, and it keeps communication open between us and the county and all the key players. So I do understand and realize a lot of work went into this, and I support it moving forward. Thank you very much.
I would also like to give county staff again credit. We've gotten some great guidance from the county on how to approach this topic from their perspective. And so that's been helpful. Blaine and I had a great opportunity to meet with staff a couple of months ago. And so they've really helped us get to this stage so that we could present it to you.
Great. Yes, Councilor Wiesner.
Yeah, it's great job, Steve. This is something, obviously, we actually, I think, asked the question, because if we don't ask the question, the answer is always no. We asked the question about a year ago, and then we've been persistent in asking the question to the county, what is it we need to do?
About two, what?
Two letters, yeah. 2 years ago.
2 years ago and a year ago.
Yeah, and a year ago. And we stayed persistent with it, asking the county, what is it we need to do in order to have this discussion? And obviously, we finally got the answer, and we're moving forward. So something, obviously, I support wholeheartedly. I think it's important for us as council members to know where we have to expand. We're making decisions now on projects. So for example, the park project, which may be a project 10, 15 years out, but that's how far we have to think ahead. And with the limitations we have in front of us right now, it's hard to make some of those decisions. So kudos to staff for hanging in there and being persistent and getting these meetings put together. Thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. We have a joint meeting with our planning commission, so if the letter goes in, stuff, this might be one of the topics to that joint commission meeting between planning and council in September.
I think we're going to try to touch on all of the docket items. We're probably going to focus most of our time on housing.
Right.
But I think we're going to ask to try to spend just a couple of minutes on some of the other docket items as well. Yeah, so this would be one of the topics.
And just for clarification, so there's the housing area, I believe I know it, but on the far side, next to the water, it's, anyway, that's white. No, down by the EV's Perry. Keep going over there. What is that in there?
That is
I don't
the only
recall that
thing we're
housing.
showing here is that this is the boundary of the preserve, or the reserve here. And so we weren't capturing this because it was quite a bit farther than the mile and a half zone of
Okay.
influence that we were using.
Okay. But there isn't the housing there. The other one, we know there's a housing there.
Yes, that one you can look and you can see the actual lotting pattern. And I'm sure that there are houses there as well, but that's more of a rural pattern. Whereas these areas here, that area there has a distinctly urban characteristic to it, which is my guess as to why it's not in the reserve.
Just hope their water wells stay good.
Yeah.
So, okay.
All right, so
Can you
then
send that map to us?
we will make sure that you all
Okay,
get that.
Appreciate it, thank you.
And then this is generally the schedule that we'll be following, and then the process that we'll be following, and we'll keep you posted. So thank you for your input tonight. This is exactly what we needed.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Heisen.
Can we take 5-minute recess for our next item?
Okay. Okay. Recess 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Hey, somebody stole some of our candy.
Need some more?
Maybe we should find a police officer and track them down. Oh, I think it was him.
Okay, I'd like to call this special meeting of the special workshop meeting for the Oak Harbor City Council, July 24th meeting back to order. We took a short break, and we are working on our non-action items. And under development services, we have one more, B, increasing residential building capacity, and a grant opportunity. So I'll give it back to Mr. Powers.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a rapidly evolving item, and our timing worked out actually very well that we were able to throw it onto your agenda quickly to get it in front of you. We are going to need to try to get some general ideas to what the council thinks, and I'll explain why that is in just a moment. So I think I'll just jump right into the presentation. What have I done wrong here? It's on. There we go. Okay, so this Bill 1923 was one of the many housing bills passed this year by our legislature and signed into law by the governor. We'll be talking about more of those later on as this year and next year unfolds. But this particular one was intended to incentivize cities to increase housing variety. And so it's not just affordable housing, it's not just market rate housing, it actually is geared towards both. There are grant funds available from the state if a city commits to taking certain specific actions, or if the city works to develop a housing action plan, and there are specific things that need to be in that plan, as you might expect. The Department of Commerce is the one who will administer these grants. They distributed some information, an information handout just very recently. That was in your packet. It was this one here. The other thing which came out, which was actually a surprise to us and somewhat concerning until we got our hands wrapped around it, was there's also a survey that came out from them that was intended to determine what the preferences of cities of 20,000 people population or above were in terms of how they might use these grant funds. And we're required to respond with our preferences. So this is the part that concerned us for a bit. But thanks to one of our colleagues who works in another jurisdiction, sent it our way and said, I'm sure you've already seen this. And I thought, oh, no, I haven't. So we were supposed to have received a survey via email, but we didn't. Earlier, sometime in late June or early July, the surveys were due back July 10th. So as soon as I found that out, I jumped on and got a hold of the folks at Commerce, the people who were running this particular project. They said they had a number of problems with certain email actually being bounced back, and they just hadn't quite got that all figured out yet, and we were one of those cities. So what they've done is they've sent us the survey. This is the thing that I'll be discussing with you this evening. Applications for our grant funds were supposed to have been put in by July 22nd, but that's not a hard and fast date. Or I'm sorry, they're supposed to be available by the 22nd, due by August 30th. So what have we done? Well, we've contacted Commerce, we've gotten this thing straightened out, we've got the survey sent to us just last Thursday, and we've reviewed that internally, myself and the planners, and I'm ready to give you some input on what we think. As you saw by looking at this material here, there were a number of actions, and the city has to choose 2 out of that list, that laundry list of things, and that would make you eligible for some funding. Or you can choose to do the housing action plan, and that would make you eligible for funding as well. And so what I'm seeking from the council this evening is a little bit of input on your preferences as to how we might complete the survey and send our responses back to Commerce. Now, I've also put this on the screen, but obviously the handout will be for the council because it will be too small to read, but I thought it was worthwhile to just have up there as a visual. So what I've done on this handout is on the front page are all the items that were associated with item number 1, which was to select at least 2 of the actions listed below, and they were numbered 1A through 1L. And then on the back side is the second option, which is the housing action plan. So I'll stay on the front side for just a moment, please. And while I've broken this down into a simple yes/no answer, that's not actually what the survey asks us to do. And bear with me here. Our responses, our choices are, we will likely not implement this measure at this time. We will likely use our grant funding to implement this measure, or we've already done this thing, whatever this thing is. The problem is that I think some of our answers want to be maybe, and we don't really have a choice for maybe. And so that's why I've done this for your benefit. The first 2 don't apply to us at all because they are for much larger jurisdictions. Obviously, we don't have a light rail station, and we don't have a 500-acre area that we can designate for a special kind of housing incentives. We also don't have a high-frequency transit corridor with at least 25 dwelling units per acre. So the first 2 choices don't apply whatsoever. Choice number 1C, we could choose to allow at least 1 duplex, triplex, or courtyard apartment on each parcel in each zoning district that allows single-family residences. Well, yes, we can do that, but your staff thinks we can do that without funding. We're having a hard time envisioning what the grant funding would really achieve for us on that. It doesn't seem like that's significant enough, or we would need to pay somebody to help write our code to do that. And so we've checked, as a place to start the conversation, we've checked no for that particular item. The next one down, we could try to authorize cluster zoning or lot size averaging in those districts which allow single-family residences. Those are tools, as you saw in that longer handout, that allows some flexibility in how you lay out your subdivisions. We think that we accomplished that already through our existing planned residential development option. If we at some point wanted to come back in and add that as a specific item, and I won't go into all of the technical details again, that's probably not all that technically complex to do. 1E, council certainly is aware of the fact that we've just recently, or semi-recently, adopted a revised accessory dwelling unit code. There were a number of things in that code, that big box you saw, that we'd already accomplished. Some of them were actually more restrictive than what we already do right now, so it wouldn't make sense for us to pursue that. So we've checked that one as a no. The next 2, to adopt a sub-area plan pursuant to a particular piece of the RCW. 4321 is actually the area that deals with SEPA. And so that's really not applicable given the geography of Oak Harbor. And the same is true for the planned action pursuant to a different RCW. 1H is a possibility. Although that's in a binary world, we chose no. So we could adopt an infill exemption under, again, the SEPA regulations for residential and mixed-use development. It's a pretty good idea. It might be something we want to think about in the future, but in our community, SEPA is not really a barrier to development the way that it is in other communities. And so if we were going to spend money on something, this wouldn't be our first choice, but it is clearly a choice that we wanted to bring to the council's attention. Next 2 items, adopt a form-based code in 1 or more zoning districts that permit residential uses. That's something that the city's already expressed an interest in. It's supported by our comprehensive plan policy. It might be a little premature for us to try to tackle that now. There's a lot of work that goes into education and working with the community and various interest groups before you'd be ready for a form-based code. But it is definitely an option if the council wanted to really sort of step way outside of the box. That might be something that you would direct us to pursue. And then the last one there, I've got the green, authorize a duplex on each corner lot. That's a simple idea. We think it's actually a good idea. We don't think we need money to do that. The last 2 on the front side of the page, we're already at the maximum number of lots which are allowed under short platting, so we don't need to spend any time on that. And a minimum net density of 6 dwelling units per acre. It doesn't seem to fit our community all that well. Each of our districts already has a minimum density in it, and we think that process is working fairly well. At least we haven't heard to the contrary. So the back side of the page is the one that I think staff would encourage you to consider the most, which is the Housing Action Plan. And over in the right-hand side of the box, this one shows up better because there's not so much text. I put some notes here as to why we think this would be an idea that would be worth pursuing. I think one of the things that we need, and staff agrees, in order to really tackle the housing question in our community, is it would really benefit us to have some up-to-date data and an assessment of our existing housing condition and where we have gaps in terms of serving the various income levels and the various types of housing. And that's part of what would be a requirement as part of this plan. So the first reason that this is attractive to us is we think it will fill a data gap for us. Secondly, we're looking down the road. There was a comment earlier about planning out 5, 10, 15 years. That's an occupational hazard for us. And we're looking down the road to the 2024 update that we have to have done for our comprehensive plan. We're going to back up 2 years, 2022. We're going to be talking to the county about urban growth areas. Having a housing analysis that might give us information that could be used, that would be useful as we talk about updating our comprehensive plan. We see some attractiveness there. And then finally, the last point, while it's not a buildable lands analysis, certainly, it may yield information that would assist us in reviewing our urban growth area. For example, do we have enough capacity for a particular kind of housing need that our community has? And that's a level of detail that we don't currently have in terms of resources available to us. So if the staff was going to choose between the options available to us, we would head this way. But clearly we want to hear from the council, and there are some other choices as well. Happy to help you with your questions.
Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you. Mr. Powers, so the grant money is actually being offered up in order to create the changes in these regulations or create the housing plan. It's not to go to the city to be used for low housing.
Correct.
So in other words, we have to spend it on the exact action to either create or modify these regulations or create this housing plan.
Yes, that's correct. And in my haste to try to go through this item quickly, one of the things I didn't touch on is the very last point here, is that the state's not interested in us in writing a plan that just sort of gives us ideas. It has to include a schedule of programs and actions to implement the recommendations of the housing plan. So that might lead to additional regulation review or revisions. It may lead to other things as well.
And how, I mean, how is the state releasing these funds? I mean, are we providing them, cost, direct cost or indirect cost in the revisions that we would have to make, or, in the study that's done?
I think I might have, this will give you some ideas to answer your question. So we're going to look for your preferences tonight. Our immediate next steps, we would submit answers to the survey that give the Commerce an idea of what it is we're interested in. We will then eventually get an application back from them to apply for the grant funds. I think the number that's being used is around $100,000, plus or minus. And what I envision would happen with either option 1 or option 2 is that you would then end up with a consultant contract to help you either change your regulations or develop this plan. And the way those grants typically work is there's a scope of work that we put in there that the state says these are the tasks that need to be completed. Then we would come to you, we would go through a consultant selection process. The contract, scope of work with that consultant would match the scope of work that's in the grant application. And then it would be a reimbursable grant. So we pay the consultant, then we submit our invoices in essence to the state reimburses us.
Okay, and just one final thing, I guess I have a little concern in the fact that, so there's a couple of items, I certainly the developing the plan, I'm not necessarily a plan kind of guy. I mean, I like making plans, but I like actually implementing plans more than I like making plans, right? And so I see at the end, obviously, we have some implementation that has helped. But in looking at the development of the plan, I see some very specific areas that I absolutely agree that are areas that we need more information. I know that we've discussed this before, that we've been dealing with, you know, vague information. We've been dealing with Department of Commerce information. We've been dealing with, you know, wherever we can get information, and lots of it's lagging, and lots of it's not necessarily accurate to within our state limits. But I guess my concern is part of this is to continue to consider strategies to minimize displacement of low-income residents, develop strategies to increase supply of housing, and provide for participation and input from community members, community groups, local builders, local realtors, nonprofit housing advocates, local religious group. We just spent 2 years doing that. I mean, to an extent. I mean, we did not quantify existing and projected housing needs for all income levels, but we just spent 2 years with an affordable housing task force assembled by the city and the county. We provided for input, for participation from input for community members for 2 years. From that, we developed a list of strategies that would increase the supply of housing and minimize displacement of low-income residents. So it sounds like what we're doing is we're circling back around to the beginning, and I guess that's where I'm concerned at. Are we going to take all of the stuff that we gathered up over that 2 years and all the information we gathered from that community input over that 2 years, and are we just going to toss it aside and say, well, now we got this grant, so we're going to start all over again?
I think that's a great comment, and I wouldn't envision that. I think the thing that you would gain by doing this particular item number 2, is the data to support steps beyond what the Affordable Housing Task Force identified. And as I said here, I am particularly intrigued about how we can use the items that we have to do here and this funding to support us in other state mandated work that we're going to have to tackle that typically doesn't have funding. So the mandated updates to our comprehensive plan haven't had funding associated with them since 2002 was the last time there was any funding for those projects. So whether it's something that we're doing by ourselves or we're doing with the county, it's entirely on the city's nickel. I see this information, and particularly the quantification of the demand, populations that are being served or underserved, and taking what sometimes is anecdotal information and actually getting hard data. I see that helping us as we move into the future with our comprehensive plan and our urban growth area conversations. Absolutely would not want to throw away or displace the work that's already been done to this point. So I think that's how I would respond to that concern of yours. Again, this is a particular choice. It doesn't have to be the only one. I mean, again, there are some other ones here that we could just as easily pursue. Again, it's still going to be the same kind of thing. We would utilize the funds to basically buy somebody else's time so that we have the capacity to handle that project in addition to the other things we're doing.
And I do agree that, you know, the items in 2A are items that while we were going through the task force, we were struggling because we didn't have those items. We did not have a good, solid source of information. So a lot of conversation we were having was trying to assemble different information from different people and come to some sort of a consensus as to what could we agree is median income, what can we agree is affordable housing or workforce housing in our city, and what is the need for housing, and you know, how many people are looking, and how many vacant properties are there. None of that stuff was available. So I guess my concern, and I'm certainly to support this, because I do get the idea that there's been a lot of unfunded mandates from the Washington, from Olympia, and that we have many unfunded mandates, I'm sure, coming up, that some of the information we can gather from this may assist us in dealing with. I guess, again, my concern, I'm just going to voice it one more time, is I don't want to see us delaying any action that we may have in place on the current task list that we have based upon the input we've received from the public. I don't want to see that set aside while we're going through this process with the concept of, oh gee, we need to go through this process before we take action. We've got a list of items that I think are very workable. I'm hoping that we're going to continue to work on those items that we spent a couple of years working on and not just set them aside. So as long as I have that assurance, I'm certainly okay with getting the city the funds necessary to do these studies and on somebody else's dime.
One other thought that I'll add is I think there's also a possibility that this particular item could help us implement other policies within our comprehensive plan. So for instance, on the topic of infill, we have goals and some policies that support the idea of infill and incentivizing infill. But we lack information that tells us what types of incentives might we really want to try to bring forward. I mean, what are the things, and frankly, that we can afford to do as from an incentive base? Are they the right kinds of incentives to bring about the right kind of housing that you're trying to spur along? Not that long ago, there was the meeting on the opportunity zone, and we know that that particular census tract is characterized by a lot of residential land, and some of the opportunities that people talk about in that concept are housing opportunities or mixed-use housing opportunities. If we're going to suggest to investors that there's a particular thing lacking in our community, this will help us identify those things. So I think there's some broad applicability here, but I certainly take note of your comment that you don't want to lose sight of the work that's already been done.
You know, I would agree because I've sat in most of those meetings too. I think that what that group did is an excellent start to this plan that we're talking about here. And I think I have heard the Chamber of Commerce say that housing and affordable housing is their top priority. Here recently, I heard that come from the Chamber. And we've got kind of a perfect storm going here. We've got this opportunity zone, and it certainly does hit in residential, and I think is a really good opportunity to combine these things.
And also market rate housing, and that's the other component, Mr. Wiesner, that this work here is not to be focused just on affordable housing. It's also to look at what are those things that the community can do that make market rate housing easier to achieve. Because it's about increasing residential building capacity. It's not entitled a law for affordable housing, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a great, but so there's a piece there that we haven't done a lot of work on, is how do we increase the capacity for market rate housing as well.
Councilor
Thank you,
Larson.
Mayor. It sounds like the upside to this is we have the potential to get a lot of good data that we couldn't afford to otherwise generate by ourselves that can have multiple uses moving into the future. And I believe, if I'm hearing this right, is Councilman Wiesner's concerns as far as the work that the Affordable Housing Task Force completed isn't going to be set aside, if I'm hearing you correctly. As a matter of fact, it might actually be provided and supplemented by the information that we're going to gather from whoever we might hire to complete the studies that are necessary. I'd like to say that the work that the Affordable Housing Task Force completed, they came forth with a number of recommendations. We've already acted on a few of those. There are others on the table that we're looking at as well. And I myself would share the concern that, we continue on that track, but I think that they are not mutually exclusive. I think we can continue looking at the recommendations and looking at what work we need to do that was presented in the recommendations from that task force while we pursue some much needed information that could prove very valuable to us as we move forward in a number of venues. So I support this particular track. Thank you.
Councilor Servadius.
Thank you. Before I had your spreadsheet, just reading through this, the one that caught my eye was H1H. So they're wanting us to pick at least 2 in section 1 or section 2 that incorporates all of those? Is that correct?
Yes, so in order to be eligible for the funding, you have to either choose 2 of number 1 off of the number 1 list, or you choose the number 2 list, the number 2 item.
So if we go, and I could support number 2, and I'll discuss why, but if we go with developing the housing plan, I would still like to keep some focus on 1H. You know, so you say could pursue if city council interested. I don't know exactly how much interest or guidance you need there, but for me, I would be interested in kind of fleshing that out in my neophyte view of planning and all of that. I'm not sure what that would entail, but I would be interested in exploring that. I wasn't on I kind of followed the Affordable Housing Task Force, but do you envision this data, and I'm very interested in good and quantifiable data, would be more Oak Harbor centric than maybe some of the work that was done by the Affordable Housing Task Force? Was that more Oak Harbor, Island County wide? Would this be a little more Oak Harbor centric?
I think that's a fair statement, yes. I think both of those are fair statements. The task force looked at things that both the county and the city could do, from my perspective, it's just sort of a North Whidbey kind of thing, but it could be elsewhere on the island. And I think this effort will be more focused inside of the city's existing urban growth area. I mean, that's the boundary that I would envision, because that's the area that we're responsible for planning for.
Well, it might sound a little biased, but we're city council members, so I want to focus right here. So if this gets us more granular and better data, then I'll support that. But let's not lose sight of number H there, 1H.
Last housing assessment that we had was when the city did the original comprehensive plan, which was adopted in '95, and the assessment was probably 1992 or 93. And so we've been lacking data, hard data, really, for quite some time.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Just a kind of out of the box. With all the work in the 2 years, you don't want to dismiss it, but we also want to concentrate on Oak Harbor. But it is a building block of sorts. I would like to be sure that when we go to get the more in-depth and concise what Oak Harbor needs, we do credit to the 2 years of study, because sometimes it comes across that here you're trying to get 2 groups to work together and you come up, but we need to concentrate, because we are city council, on ours. But when you kind of look like you just squashed 2 years of work, do you see there's a way to present it with giving credit and using that building block, but then expanding the Oak Harbor part of that building block and make it better and validate it and come up with what we need. But sometimes it's how you present it. We get caught with blinders, and I'm doing my job, but it's nice when you can bring in and acknowledge other things. I mean, I'm not trying to tell you, kind of am trying to tell you how to do it, but when you acknowledge other groups, it makes it easier when you're trying to get what you're doing done by acknowledging something else has been done, but then we build upon it. Instead of just saying, okay, yeah, 2 it works, we're gonna give them credit, but kind of when you present it, you're not. So at least pull out the tidbits.
So tonight's presentation was only focused on how we might respond to
Right.
to the survey.
Yes.
It was not intended to talk about the materials that we might use as a starting point if the council chose to do the housing study. That's pretty typical for us. When you start
Right.
anything like this, you look at what's already been done, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
Right? So this presentation jumped right into how do we respond
Right.
to the state. If we move forward, if the council moves forward with option number 2, there will be a whole process that we're going to go through that you will be engaged in. There'll be actually the actual application itself. We're envisioning on the staff level that the consultant selection process, we'd like to involve a member of the planning commission, a member of the city council as part of the team that's reviewing the RFP responses that we get. And so we want to make sure that the council is engaged and the planning commission is engaged as we go through this, because we know how important this broad topic is. I just didn't want to try to cover
Right.
the breadth of
Right.
material this evening.
And I'm looking ahead of that. Obviously, we're gonna go through with this and we're gonna keep going. It's just that when you start to get in the meat and you do the action, it is nice to remember kind of where you started and to keep that cooperation, even though the application has nothing to do with it. I just don't want to forget the history. Does that? We need the application, we need to do it for us and blah, blah, blah. But when you get down there, there's a way to present things, not with the application, I'm thinking months, next year, to kind of tie it all in. Sometimes we forget to tie stuff in and it ends up smacking some things wrong. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor
I didn't
Heisen.
understand a word of it. but
No, I was
it
tracking.
makes sense.
Thank you, Mayor. For the record, I wholeheartedly support number 2. What is it that you need from us tonight? Just a general.
I was just looking for some idea as to whether you are mostly of a like mind or whether you had other ideas that you wanted us to pursue. We can proceed forward, and we're going to check a couple of these boxes as because there's a little bit of wiggle room. It says we will likely use our funding for this. And so a couple of these where I said they were yes, but we might not want to do them right now, I think we're still going to check that as we will likely, because we don't want to foreclose the opportunities.
Sure.
What I think I'm getting from the council is that you're generally comfortable with us responding in a fashion that sort of represents what we have here. And then likely pursue option number 2, but we'll wait. Our next step will be when we get the application from the state. And we'll keep you posted all along the way. If for some reason it looks like 2 is not going to meet our needs, it's not going to do the things that I represented to you today, we will absolutely be in conversation with you, and we'll figure out what else might be a better choice for us. I think the last thing, we just don't want this funding opportunity to go by, because that just doesn't happen that often.
I mean, especially if current relevant data to fill those gaps is one of the benefits for sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other uses for that. Yeah, sounds good to me.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Can you only select 2 in the 1 choices, or could you add the H1, as Councilman Servatius said?
It says at least 2, so I'm sure
Okay.
they would be pleased if a city wanted to tackle all of those. There's no reason why you couldn't check all of those boxes, but again, some of those we have already done.
Right,
Yeah.
but possibly just put an X in 1H so we have kind of 3 green. As you said, it doesn't mean
Sure.
we're going to, but at least it opens up
Absolutely.
and shows some things.
Yeah. All right, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We're going to move on now to engineering. You have about 30 seconds left.
We can do it.
Sorry, Jim.
No pressure.
We have a lot of projects and we need to get them done.
Item number A under engineering is professional services agreement, Corollo Engineers, Water Transmission Project, Amendment 2. Welcome back, Jim.
Thank you. On now? Which way is on?
It's on your-
Okay, it's on,
it's red.
perfect, thank you. Yeah, tonight we want to present essentially the status of 4 projects, starting with the professional services agreement for the water transmission project. This was a task or a project that was identified in our capital improvement plan, identified designated as T4. This involves the 24-inch water main transmission main that we own from Sharps Corner into the city. This would be, we've completed phase 1 of this project, which was the preliminary condition assessment investigation work plan. And that produced a map that was just recently handed out to you that shows the locations of the areas that are identified for investigation to check our level of corrosion on our pipe. Those areas were selected based upon either past history, where a water project had taken place and they had old pieces of pipe and they could tell corrosion, and so that's how they were selected. as well as a surge analysis was performed. And so based upon that, Carollo, our consultant, came up with this work plan to look at these 10 locations. Back when the project was originally funded, the task was identified, but there was no funding allotted for it, the second task. And so that's why we're here tonight to discuss that second task. Essentially, Carollo, we've asked them to retain a contractor that would go out and excavate these pits. These pits are substantial in size, about the size of this table. They will dig down to the pipe and dig underneath the pipe so they can expose the pipe all the way around it. They will do non-destructive testing. Obviously, it's an ultrasonic test around the pipe to check for pipe thickness. They will take soil samples for the corrosivity of the soil, things of this nature, and then they will develop a report and a plan that talks about obviously steps going forward. How we're going to, if these areas of pipe are concerned, how would we address it? Potential cost estimates to replace sections of pipe and things of this nature. The reason we pulled this off the action item section of the agenda tonight was we were under negotiations with Carollo. In 2017, I believe when this plan was first adopted, they thought that the cost was going to be about $185,000. And so they've since come back and thrown cost at us in the neighborhood about $345,000, Alex, somewhere in that neighborhood, which obviously opened our eyes. We said, well, wait a second. So we're back to negotiating with those folks on this. It does require them to retain 2 sub-consultants, one that would perform the excavation as opposed to us going out and going through the Public Works bid process and bidding that work out ourselves. The other would be a corrosive expert that would come in and perform the test itself. Carollo would, in our latest negotiations, they were going to provide some contract oversight and inspection services, and we've since pulled that. We're going to do some of that work in-house, as well as there's a potential to remove one of the pits that we may or may not be needed. In talking with Rich earlier tonight, he thinks there might be one pit that we can delete, which if there's 10 pits, the current cost is about $215,000 for the excavation. We should lower that by $21,000. So that's where we're at on this project. Just a quick highlight where we're at. Additionally, the current contract with Carollo is $110,000 under budget, so that money would be shifted. It wouldn't be any new money from council on top for Carollo's contract, but additional money for the sub-consultant work that would take place. So that's where we're at, and I will take questions.
Councilor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. I apologize if
That's
this
okay.
is a stupid question in advance. So I'm looking at the 10 location pits, did you call them?
Yes.
Pits? The 10 pits, 4 of which are on Whidbey Island, 1 of which appears to be in city limits. Obviously, we have an interest in the whole line since this is how we get our water, but can you just explain why we're responsible for the 10 of these?
Well, we own the water line all the way to Sharps.
Okay, so it's ours?
It's ours.
The whole line is
Right.
ours? Okay.
And a lot of the work is along the highway, which involves permitting through WashDOT and traffic control. So that's why the price of the work to dig the pit itself is as high as it is. $215,000 is the
That
current
makes
cost.
sense.
So, and then there is the Navy share because it is the 24-inch water main transmission.
Right.
So the Navy would pay for half of that work. So.
And is that accounted for in this
It is
estimate, or
not.
is this our share? of
This
the
is
work?
our number only.
Okay.
We're not including any of the Navy costs, so you would split it in half.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilor Wiesner.
So just to clarify, the actual cost is twice this, and this is just our share?
No, this is the total cost.
Okay. Now, holes number 1, 2, 3A, 3B, those are all right over by Sharps. Didn't we just get done replacing that line here a few years ago when the highway was rerouted over there? Or?
No, the line wasn't replaced with the Sharps Corner project. There was
7 lengths of pipe that were replaced probably about 15 years ago, but the rest of that was just they built over the top of the existing mains.
And is there a reason for the 3A, 3B? It looks like they're testing real close to each other there.
Well, that was because we had to replace those 7 sections was because of corrosion. We had a pipe failure in that area, so we had to replace that. So there is a heightened anxiety of that pipe being could be potential corrosion.
Because a lot of the times it's due to the acidity of the soil and et cetera
Yes,
around
it
it, so
is.
the site conditions
Yeah.
contribute to that.
And that has been a suspect area, big time there. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We did replace the water mains like at Banner Road. We did get them out of the site, so those are all replaced lines there. So, but these, at Sharps Corner, there was a high susceptibility of corrosion in that area, and they weren't replaced.
Thank you.
Other questions?
So our plan would be to continue our negotiations with Carollo and then come back to the city council with an amendment to the contract to perform the remaining task of the project. So.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on to B, Flintstone Park restroom.
Thank you. So, back in '96, the City Council and Island Transit teamed up to provide the transit location and restrooms at Flintstone Park. And those restrooms we're looking to replace those with Portland Loos, similar to what we have installed recently at Windjammer Park. Island Transit, in the original agreement, was responsible for the cleaning and maintenance of the restrooms. And when we've identified the Portland Loos, they've decided that they would like to contribute $70,000 to installation of Portland Loos. We've purchased 2 Portland Loos. They're at the city shop. And this project would be to demolish the existing restroom facility and build a new concrete slab and put these 2 Portland Loos at that location. So it's really just a concrete slab, 2 Portland Loos side by side connecting the utilities, and Hank will work with our current provider to rearrange some of there's some internet services down there and some cameras and things of this nature. So that would be outside the scope and we're not looking for that. So we've estimated this project at $42,500. There would be cost that the city, this would be a contract cost to construct. The additional cost would be the cost for city staff to demolish the existing restroom instead of contracting that service out. We have performed the building material analysis on the restrooms. There is no asbestos or other hazardous material, so it's a pretty straightforward demolition. The plan right now would be to take that sheet metal roof off and save that. That's a very expensive material and it has a useful purpose to it. But the rest of the building would be demolished, hauled off and taken to the landfill. Like I said, a concrete slab and 2 side-by-side loos would go in. So, and that's where we're at on that project. Take questions on that one.
Questions? Councilor Servatius.
If we approve it, timelines?
Right now, we are in permitting. We have our permit in for our shoreline management permit. And we're waiting for that to process out. And then once while that's going on, we're working on other projects. And so that goes where we can start dressing these plans up and getting them out to bid. So it would be a fall project as well. Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. As long as we're destroying and redigging and putting in a slab, is there, I'm guessing some electricity in the area? Would we want to put in some receptacles or something so in case there's an vent there that you want to plug in that you've already got? I mean, as long as you're digging up, let's think about this. And you got a hole, let's put the stuff we need to in there or the conduit so we can do it later. So I'm just throwing it out. As anyone thought about that?
Right, and so I didn't think about that, and I prepared the permit in working with Dennis Lefevre, our planning staff. We try to keep our footprint small because we're down in the waterfront. in the shoreline management area, as well as the potential archaeological cultural resources in there. So, but it's certainly something we can look at, depending on what they want to do, how far out you want to extend those type of services. I mean, I agree, if we got a chance to put conduit in the ground, we
We've
should.
had some lights there, so you've got it in the ground, you're gonna move it somewhere or pull it up or whatever, but even, I mean, just somewhere on the slab, it doesn't have to be perfectly placed, just the opportunity that, let's use electricity is there and make it into something that could be useful in
Yeah, that
near
should,
future.
that should be simple enough to do. I thought you might be extending it further out
No,
in the
no,
park
no,
beyond the
no. I'm
limit of
just-
our, okay, I'm with you. Yeah, yeah,
We got it
that's
there, let's not
certainly
just bury
doable.
it and ignore it, but we're always needing plugs for all kinds of things, for events, and why not put in a bunch and there it's to be used.
certainly doable.
Councilor Larson?
Thank you, Mayor. Question of practicality, Mr. Bridges. Spent a lot of time in the car with my kids asking the question, how long can you hold it? So I know you said.
Are we
this
there
is
yet?
I know you said this is going to be a fall project, but about how long between the demolition of the old building and then Portland Lou's being up and functioning?
Well, right now, it's at least number 3 in our process or queue. So we have Oak Harbor Middle School, or intermediate school, that we just knocked that one out. Our next one we're looking at is the Bayshore mid-block crosswalk. That's coming up next that we want to get out the door. After that, it's going to be the Windjammer pedestrian ramp, and then the Portland Loop project would follow in there 3. So we are on timeline. We're hitting them about every 2 or 3 weeks, so we should be in that September timeframe to bid this and do concrete work. So it's only concrete work. There's no asphalt, and you can do concrete work year round. So.
Okay, I
and-
get that. For people listening and watching at home who use that area, between the time that there's no bathrooms till the time there's a functioning bathroom.
The bathrooms are going to remain in place and useful until we actually mow in and tear the building down and then start work. So we're not taking the building down and being 3 or 4 months later, we're going to put Portland Lou's. They are in service and will remain in service until we start construction.
And that construction is how long? Is the question.
Oh, the construction is how long? That's the question.
Sorry.
All right, I didn't hear it. That's all right. Yeah, okay.
Our dinner's getting cold.
My daughter's 34, so we haven't been on a long road trip in a long time. Construction's about a month. About a month, yeah.
Thanks.
Councilor Servadius?
Thank you. I just wanted to strongly second the point Ms. Munns made about the electrical. The Chamber's Crab Cakes and Cocktail, that's become their preferred spot. I don't know if it'll stay there forever, but it's a nice small park that groups could rent. It's fairly contained footprint. So just please, if we can get some electrical in there that they could tap into if they've got a permit.
Yep.
Okay.
So our third project tonight we talk about is the Southeast Bayshore Mid-Block Crossing. As we all know, this project, there's been quite a bit of contact between the public, staff, and city council over the crossing of Bayshore and the use of the park and the ball fields and things of this nature. And so we've identified this project as a priority to accomplish. This project will be similar to the intermediate school with the exception of the asphalt hump, speed hump. There won't be a speed hump in place. So we will narrow up in the diagram that's been provided. Those are the bulb outs that will narrow up the roadway. It'd be 2 12-foot lanes. When we would install the ADA ramps and the rectangular rapid flashing beacons to go in there. So it's a pretty quick project. Unfortunately, based upon the cost of the bids that we received for the intermediate school project, this one's now estimated at about $73,000. Now that included removing some additional sidewalk if you can see in the picture, you see the white bars in the sidewalk. Those are the areas that have been ground down because the sidewalk shifted and had changed levels. So that estimate is based upon taking out existing sidewalk and replacing existing sidewalk as well as the curb ramp. So there are some locations where when you look at a project like this, is how much do we really want to get into it? Because we know at some point in time, Bay Shore is going to need work itself, an overlay, new ADA ramps and things of this nature, and how much of that work do we want to accomplish now versus how much do we want to accomplish later. So we're looking at the condition of the existing sidewalk. Thank you. We're looking at the existing condition of the existing sidewalk and seeing if we really think it needs to be in or not. And additionally, it includes a driveway ramp for park maintenance access. Right now, you'll see the 4x4s or 2x4s laying in the curb, and that's where the parks crews jump the curb and they go in the backside of the ball fields and around towards Bailey's Playground. And so we're going to actually put a driveway drop section in there like a regular driveway to a residence or a business. So they don't have to do that anymore. Obviously, we have to put some bollards in that are removable where the maintenance vehicles only can get in there and they can remove them to get in and out. So install 2 storm drain catch basins. When you start looking at these bulb outs, you start looking at, they're going to hinder the flow of storm water through the gutters. And so we got to install 2 catch basins, similar again to the intermediate school. And the reason this location was selected, it meets the criteria because of the proximity of the street light. The existing street light will sit right above it. That's one of the primary criteria for a mid-block crosswalk, that lighting factor. Another was the location of the storm drains without having to do extensive storm drain work. And some of the comments that we received in the letter from Mr. Hovey, there was the concern of the lights flashing potentially into the residences down there. And if we, moved it to the west to line it up with the other park, then those lights, because the road's curved, if I move it to the west, and those lights are more directed towards the residence or around the curve, they're straight down Bay Shore. So, and of course, one set will flash the direction for eastbound, and one set will flash the direction for westbound. So that's the our reasoning for placement of this selection of this location.
Councilor Servadius.
Thank you. Why no speed hump? And if no speed hump, can we consider dropping the speed limit through there?
So we've done speed analysis through there, and our 85th percentile is right at 30 miles an hour. So it's between 29.8 to 30.9, somewhere in that neighborhood. I think the effect of the narrowing will already provide some of that reduction in speed without the speed hump. This is a designated corridor, federally functionally classified roadway, and we would look to this, and is the vision for the city going forward another road diet type project like we did on Pioneer just above it, or just maintain its straight through capacity, recognizing the speed issues. It's posted 30. I drive it routinely. I don't think I've ever gotten over 25. To me, it's a pretty rough roadway. And then if we lowered the speed limit to 25, my understanding is enforcement's not going to write a ticket till they hit 30, and so we're already back up to 30. So, is that?
Can you strike that from the record?
Yeah.
Not to throw anybody under the bus, but so we can post at 35 and everybody drives 30. So no, anyway, so I think the addition of the bump outs will help us out with that. And then it's asphalt. We can always come back in later if we need to, if we see those speeds increase and put the speed hump in. The other concern is that it's going to be helpful for is those driveways that are nearby there. Those actually act as protection. So folks pulling out of the private driveway on the north side, they have that extra width, right? So they have, you see that where that car's parked, pulling out in the park right there? He's got that extra lane to get out there and see further around. And the same thing coming out of the condominium structures there. No one's parked there. They don't have to have a sight vision issue. If someone's parked there now, those bump outs provide that additional site safety.
Mayor Pro Tem.
A question has been raised. How, if Lehigh is to be built and constructed and heavy equipment is in there, then what happens to our investment?
Heavy equipment is,
Building the construction, if Lehigh goes through, heavy construction and trucks and stuff and you've put this in, how's it going to affect if we've just put in new equipment and you have it narrowed in there and they're trying to bring,
I'm with you, yeah. So roadways typically have varying lane widths. Some are 9 feet wide lanes, some are 10, some are 11, some are 12s. And 12 is what you'll see on the freeway. So we are maintaining 2 12-foot lanes. That is adequate to pass all large vehicles that are permitted on the road with the exception of oversized loads. So it's not going to be an issue if you're worried about trucks going through there. Is that your concern, going through the bulb outs, or through the narrowing of the road?
yeah, it was just a question that was raised. The other thing is this goes through and gets approved, will we write a answer to them as to, I mean, they've sent us a letter as to yes, but, because of drain, lighting, blah, blah, the reasons you just gave us.
And we can certainly provide that letter.
I think
Response.
if they take the trouble, we need to
Absolutely.
have the courteous to go back. I'm sorry.
Could we have the president of the House, the HOA report on that?
I know, but he's got to give a report, and people like to read things that they don't always come to meetings, as we know, because people don't always come to our meetings. So I'm just saying, to me, I feel like it's the right thing to do. If we get a letter and we have an answer, we should give it back. It doesn't take that much time to be courteous and to answer a letter that you receive.
Okay. Councilor Heisen, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to understand the flashing beacons statement that you made. So there's the concern from residents that would be adjacent to the crosswalk about the flashing lights. And you made the comment that they would be facing east and west.
Right.
So if I'm looking at this, the lights would be flashing up and down the road
Yes.
and not in this direction.
Right, and if I moved it to the west, back this way, you can see how that's going to deflect, right? So now
Okay.
the road's pointed that direction for that traffic, and so that light, it's for westbound traffic, is flashing in towards the condominium.
Okay, so there would be more
Yes.
light disturbance at the, I mean, because, reading the submitted comments and the location of the proposed crosswalk, that all makes sense to me, but, I don't understand the storm drain and the light and all the criteria that you have to go with. So, thank you. I want to make sure I understood the flashing beacon issue.
And those aren't full-time flashing lights. Again, those are
Sure.
push-button lights, self-activated, and a timer, and they shut off, so.
Okay. Yeah, it's, like Beth mentioned earlier about being a good neighbor, I think anything that we can do to reduce the impact for adjacent residential is something that we should do. So I'm glad that was a consideration. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Hovey?
No, it's irregular to have public.
It is irregular, but did you have a question, or?
No, I just wanted to say, we're only one of the property owners that's affected by this crosswalk. The property owner on the north side may have an opinion. The new property owner at the
Lehigh.
vacant lot could have an opinion. Certainly Kuchar Management and the Schutte family, I know, have an opinion. So because this only hit the internet on Friday afternoon, a lot of people may not know that this is being proposed and haven't had an opportunity to speak to it.
Councilor Servades?
With that in mind, when would you see this coming forward on the agenda, Bill?
Let's see, we have, 2 meetings in August? Potentially the last meeting in August, the first meeting in September.
First meeting in September.
First meeting in September.
Yeah.
Last meeting in August, first meeting in September.
Last meeting in August is the Lehigh.
It's not available.
Oh, that's right. So,
Might be a late one.
okay. So the first meeting in September.
Councillor Heisen.
Thank you. On that note, because you have your own criteria in terms of where these can go, would it be possible to see some other options for locations?
Sure.
I mean, if this is just not an option because of storm drain and streetlights, et cetera, what would another one or two options look like? And then we could get feedback from neighbors.
We can prepare more exhibits.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, the design on this is relatively simple. That's not
Sure.
what's going to hold us up, so.
Okay.
So you want this to come back to the next workshop?
I would like it to. You know, it's easy to see a proposed location and, you know, I mean, if I lived in the neighborhood, to say, well, wouldn't it make more sense to put it there, not knowing all the things that you know. And so it would probably be more helpful, correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah,
for the neighbors to say, these are your options.
And here's your pros and cons for each side. so,
Yeah, exactly. And that way,
Yeah, the
everybody
cost.
would be able to make an educated contribution.
Sure.
Okay. We'll move on to item D, Windjammer Promenade Ramp.
This project came to us as part of the Clean Water Facility, Windjammer Park, and the folks down there that own property. There was a negotiation process to provide a ramp from the back of the Whidbey Island Bank building up to the new parking lot at Wells Fargo at fronts Pioneer. The project was designed by Carollo Engineers and was submitted to Hoffman, our general contractor for the clean water facility. Unfortunately, it was, for lack of a better term, late in the game. And as we all know, our contractor was trying to wrap things up, and they were throwing wild numbers back at to complete things that may have been minor. And they came back with a quote of about $140,000 to construct this. We haven't given it a hard look yet for a construction estimate, and I'm ranging it somewhere between $85,000 and $110,000 to do this. I have taken the plans I've submitted to our building official for code review. I know there's some concern with the clean water facility where they have the wire handrails on the edge of the walls, and those would continue through this. So again, the project was designed by the consultant. We have a set of plans, and we'd have to go through the specifications for the clean water facility and pull those specifications out for each of those items that were used so that the look would be the same. So there's a little bit of work involved with pulling this project together. But again, this is a project that we've identified and that we will have under construction this fall. So.
Okay. Questions, input? Thank you.
And that's all we have.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the next section, Fire Department. A memorandum of understanding. Island County Department of Emergency Management and Old Harbor Fire Department. Fire Chief Merrill, welcome.
Evening, Mayor,
Been a
council
while.
members. First thing, I'm not asking for any money. Just want you to know that.
Take all the time you need.
Is this your candy?
Pardon me?
Is this your candy?
Yes.
I will neither confirm nor deny, sir.
Okay.
I noticed when Mr. Servadius walked in, he looked at it and went, yeah, okay. So we're good. First item I've got for you is our memorandum of understanding for the use of our Emergency Operations Center. Mrs. Sparza is smiling because this has been a project of hers for 7 years that we finally got completed. The history of that is when we first built the building, our Emergency Operations Center was upstairs on the east side. Island County, when Mr. Brooks got there, said, let's work together. Can we partner up somehow? Can we make our emergency response plans work together? Can we take our CEMPs and make them work together? Can we create a joint information group? Can we work together? And we said, why not? Because there's benefit for both of us. Mrs. Sparza got a little nervous because they had some space that they were utilizing in our facility and there was an agreement in hand. So Mr. Brooks and I worked back and forth for a number of years to finally get to what we've got today that you have in your packet. This will come before you in the August 7th meeting for authorization to be signed, to go back for the county to sign off on. There's no cost involved, there's no money transferring between entities. The nice part is they're utilizing our facility and we're getting all kinds of stuff in kind. We've got a plotter, we've gotten printers, we've gotten computers, we've got equipment, we've got people. We've got stuff that we can utilize that makes it easier and better to handle an incident when it should occur. So that's in a nutshell what it's about.
What do you need from us?
I'm just telling you it's coming forward for you to authorize the signature of it when it comes up in the August meeting. That way I don't have to do a whole agenda item, we can do it on the consent when it comes forward.
Yeah, good. I like it.
Is that brief? That's good?
That's good. You're on a roll.
I'm on a roll.
We'll go to B.
We'll go to B. So the next one is, I'm not joking with you. I sent it in.
So we'll take this break to have a piece of cake.
Okay, well, we'll move forward. I have pictures.
We have it too.
You have pictures on yours, so we're good. Our self-contained breathing apparatus, you've got a picture of what it looks like, just to give you an idea what self-contained breathing apparatus is and what it is. Pressurized air cylinder we utilize, 30 to 45 minutes of air supply, sealed mask, positive pressure, designed to meet NFPA standards. They're good for 15 years from the date of manufacture. Ours expires in 2020. So we were looking at, the Island Chiefs got together and said, can we write for a grant? Because us, North Whidbey, Central and South are all due within the next year to 18 months. And we said, sure, certainly we can see about doing a Assistance to Firefighters grant. We want to do a regional grant application with FEMA. Originally North Whidbey was going to write that grant, however the fire chief there has left and kind of just dropped the ball and said, there you go. So a little bit of history. Back in 2005, we applied for and received a FEMA grant to replace all of our SCBA's. We also got a new air compressor and we also got a new fill station. Our SCBA's have a 15-year lifespan. They're due in 2020. We need 32 SCBA's. We need 64 bottles. We need 10 additional bottles for what's called RIT packs and 50-ish masks because we issue a mask to each individual. Approximately about $7,000 a piece. So we're looking at about $275,000. If we go for a regional grant, it's a matching fund of 10 to 15%. When we look at the regional grant, there's 32 air packs from us, 50 from North Whidbey, 37 from Central, 40 from South Whidbey, plus some extra bottles and some extra masks for them. All total, we're looking at about $100,115,000 for the grant. You don't have to buy them all at the same time, which is nice, nor do you all have to buy the same mask or the same SCBA's. If we choose Scott, so be it. If somebody else chooses MSA, so be it. FEMA doesn't care. They're just going to issue out the money. And we have 1 year from the time to purchase it from the award. I have talked with Patricia, and she was overly enthusiastic to be a part of this. Money, money. So we are going to write the request for the grant. We're going to utilize Camino's grant paperwork. They did it a year ago, and they were awarded $875,000 for theirs. So we're going to utilize the material they used. We have to put our own demographics into it. But since they were so successful, we're going to, I won't say we stole it from them, but I'll say we borrowed it very well. There will be a 10 to 15% matching funds. We have set aside money for the last 15 years to purchase new packs, so we do have money set aside right now, $320,000, in the event that we don't get the grant. But we're hoping that it goes through. They're very good on regional grants, especially for SCBA's. The interesting part about FEMA is it could be as early as next month that they ask for it, and they usually have a 30-day window from the time they open the grant for AFG to the time they close it, and we've seen it as late as February of the following year. So what I'm asking of you is just to let you know that when this comes open, we're going to apply right away. I don't want to have to wait and come back to you at another meeting or another meeting or another meeting at some point. I want you to know up front that When this grant opens up, we're gonna apply for it, and then it's in the process to see if it gets approved. And it could take up to 6 months from the time that we submit to when it's approved. Could be a month, it could be 6 months, but. How's that for brief?
It's impressive.
Usually I don't talk that fast and get through it that quickly. So I didn't ask for any money.
Councillor Servatius.
Question, thank you first and foremost. Is $7,000, is that mask, backpack, tank?
That's the
Two
whole
tanks?
works. That's one tank,
That's great, right?
the pack, the mask.
Just amazing with
Yeah,
this.
and that's not even the most expensive mask. The new ones are about $2,200 a piece, and they've got a full heads-up display inside of your bottle, that you reserve, the amount of air, how fast you're utilizing, how much you're breathing, what your heart rate is, and everything else. We're not buying those.
They sound really cool.
They are really cool. Any other questions? So you won't see this come back to you until we apply for the grant, and I'll let you know that we've applied for it when that happens.
Okay,
That's all I got for you.
thanks, chief. That was quick. Okay, we're moving to city administrator's report.
All right, I'll give you a choice. You want the long version, short version, or really short version?
The long version.
Long version, I'll go with All right, starting off, I still will go, I'm not gonna cover every item, so I'm gonna do real long. Arts Commission, just to kind of update you, given some other projects there, we're going to postpone the working on the creative arts district. I want to focus on the sculpture park and the Acorn sculptures. Moving on to Main Street, the entrance signs have come in, but they have some issues with the Main Street with the installation, so we're storing them for them. And we also are working on possible locations. Just to reiterate, I served on the selection committee for the executive director. The person they hired, Haley Sanford, started last Monday. So we'll start seeing her around and introduce her to staff and to the council. Real exciting. She comes from us from Kansas with previous experience with the chamber and with nonprofit organizations. Down to the HPC, Historic Preservation Commission. One of the things I really want to, we're going to do some marketing on it, is the valuation for the historically certified places, and I gave you a kind of example of where you can really get your, in the map in there, where you can get your taxes. If you work on a declared historic building, which now that we have the local designation, we can issue that, and then you can do a 10-year reduction in your tax valuation. So it's an incentive for people to put money into historic buildings. And also with that, we did have some state input on the ordinance, and we probably will be coming back for some possible changes. Moving on to community support, I continue to support and serve on the Chamber's Legislative Affairs Committee. We have our 4 areas, but certainly we've now added the Navy as a major area of consideration to sort for the current court proceedings or the filings. I've done a number of presentations, and then certainly on the opportunity zone, moving on to economic development. We had a very successful meeting with about 50 people attending for the opportunity zone forum, and so creating some synergy there and trying to get people to evaluate and take advantage of that tax break in a census tract in the city. So moving on to development services, just completed last week, and I certainly appreciate the support of the engineering and the development services department. It was quite a lot of their staff sitting down together and going through a very interesting lean improvement study, and they came up with some good follow-up and good implementation plan and recommendations, and I'll be rolling those forward through staff and through the sponsors, which are the department heads, and then to the council. So more to come on that one. Just focusing on new developments, Howard's Point plat, 20 single family home development that just filed recently. They're on Fort Nugent near Boone Road, so that's adding to the list. Certainly want to acknowledge the successful summer picnic. Moving on to police department, just a nice presentation in there of the success of the police department and public works in the cleanup of city property. And then we have been able to continue to do free our waiver of dumping fees for cleaning up illegal dumping sites for the county, and so we're matching that with providing the dumpsters for free, and we hope to continue that program through October. We've had one private individual take advantage of it. We have 3 that are looking at it, and potential of 7 total that fall into that criteria. So it's nice to, when you're giving a stick and telling people they can clean up their property, that you can kind of add a carrot to that. So hopefully that'll be some really incentives to do some drastic cleanup in the city and really improve that. And then certainly trying to prevent that in the future is going to be a challenge ongoing. Moving on to Public Works, clean water facility. The negotiations with the Navy continued. We had a meeting on June 14th and provided some additional information, so that'll be ongoing. The clean water facility report, glossy full version is here in the report. My understanding, this will be the last full version. I think you kind of want to be able to continue to track the expenses, so we'll continue to provide the financial components of the full glossy report. This is the coming to the closing of this long project there. Also, I just want to thank everybody who participated and attended the grand opening for Windjammer Park, and I certainly want to point out Lisa Felix for really managing and doing a good job of bringing things together. So thank your effort there. And really making that a successful project and our successful grand opening. So, and a lot of other people helped and also in this project. And that concludes my report. Any questions?
Council questions? Councilor Servatius.
Thank you, Blaine. The one Howard Point
Yeah.
on Fort Nugent and Boone, is that city?
Fort Nugent, east of Boone. It's the last pieces in the urban growth area in that area. Annexation was 18 to 24 months ago.
That's right, there were 4 lots.
Four
Yeah, that's
parcels.
right, okay.
Yeah.
Wow, okay, cool.
Anyone else? Any questions? Any other business? Seeing none, we will adjourn at 7:42.